he tripped up himself and the Republicans. I think, listen, Chuck and Nancy did not just fall off the turnip truck. They know exactly what they are dealing with, and they are trying to figure out ways to, first of all, increase the divisions within the Republican Party, and boy, did they succeed in doing that today. And secondly, see if there are ways, big ways, little ways, in which they can get something that they want. And if they get Dreamers, these people will be heroes. They control nothing, and they would save the Dreamers without a wall. That would be remarkable.
Lonnie, where do you think this goes next?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure where it goes next. I mean, as with anything in the Trump presidency, who knows what's going to happen tomorrow. But I do think Republicans at this point, it's a very difficult situation because there is this base pressure. And while, Chris, to your point, Donald Trump may not face that base pressure, guess what? Congressional Republicans do.
Which is why they're so squeezed, right? Because if he puts them in a position to sort of abandon their principles or go against him, there's like no daylight for those folks, which is what makes it so fascinating. Jennifer Rubin and Lonnie Chen, thank you both.
Thank you.
I wrote some more thoughts on DACA that couldn't fit in the show. You can find them on our Facebook page at All In with Chris. We're monitoring some breaking news tonight as well. North Korea fired a ballistic missile eastward. Japanese government says the missile flew over the island of Hokkaido. This is the second missile fired by North Korea over Japan in just 3 weeks. Both projectiles landed in the Pacific Ocean. The launches came as North Korea continues to threaten the U.S. Pacific territory of Guam. The White House says President Trump has been briefed on this latest episode. Don't go away, Michael Moore is coming up, and the incredible story about the time President Trump called Jeff Sessions an idiot to his face. That's next.
Experience the XC for yourself before jacking into it.
I count on my Dell Small Business Advisor for tech advice. With one phone call, I get products that suit my needs and I get back to business.
Don't let dust and allergens get between you and life's beautiful moments. Flonase outperforms the #1 non-drowsy allergy pill. It helps block 6 key inflammatory substances that cause symptoms. Pills block 1, and 6 is greater than 1. Flonase changes.
The Ford store Morgan Hill has SUVs with smart technology features all at our low bottom line sale price. Get a new Edge for $8,500 net savings, or an Explorer for $7,000 net savings. Only at the Ford store Morgan Hill.
Can't make it to the TV to watch Happy Hour? No problem. Click on Listen Live from any device. Or just wait for the daily podcast after the show. And more on the go at NBCSportsBayArea.com.
The Ford store Morgan Hill has well-equipped Smart F-Series all at our low bottom line sale price. Right now, get a new F-150 Super Crew or Super Cab XLT for $11,000 net savings from MSRP. Only at the Ford store Morgan Hill.
Perfected.
New details emerging tonight about the Donald Trump outburst that prompted Attorney General Jeff Sessions to tender his resignation in May. New York Times reporting today the president, angered by Sessions' decision to recuse himself from the Russia probe and by the appointment of a special counsel, quote, told Mr. Sessions that choosing him to be Attorney General was one of the worst decisions he'd made, calling him an idiot, and said he should resign. Mr. Sessions would later tell associates the demeaning way the president addressed him was the most humiliating experience in decades of public life. According to the Times, administration officials convinced the president not to accept the resignation, and Sessions decided to stay on for the chance to crack down on immigration, which he got earlier this month when he, to great fanfare, announced the end of DACA, an achievement that might be short-lived, considering the president and Democrats are now reportedly hammering out a deal to make DACA permanent. But Rush across the White House, New York Times is now working on a book about the president. Ashley Parker has notched a series of White House scoops at the Washington Post. Bill, join me now. Glenn, this is pretty great reporting here. The humiliation seems a particular recurring theme in the lives of Trump subordinates.
Well, I think if you sign on with Donald Trump,
you got to wear a flak jacket, to say the least, maybe even a cup and a helmet. And look, I think the issue with Sessions is once Trump sours on somebody, and my colleague Maggie Lieberman and I reported, I think, earlier in the spring, that Trump had been infuriated with Sessions for recusing himself from the investigation, which, by the way, was a no-brainer, and virtually no one else apart from Donald Trump thought that Sessions did anything wrong with that. Once you have established yourself on the wrong side of Donald Trump, that's the first ingredient. The second ingredient is once you have not stood up for yourself in a sufficiently stout way, he will push you around. And I think this story extends to the present. Jeff Sessions, every time he goes out on a limb, as in DACA, when he stood there and made the announcement himself, he heard behind him the sound of Donald Trump sucking the tree out from under him.
And that's actually, I gotta think that it's not coincidental. I mean, I remember thinking to myself when Sessions was made the point person for this is weird. I mean, people commented, it is very weird the president's making one of the most consequential decisions of his administration, and he is not the public face for that. Instead, it was Jeff Sessions, and now it doesn't seem so accidental.
Well, on this decision especially, it was a decision that the president told friends, aides, and contacts that really he wanted to get out of. He sort of wanted to not make a decision at all because he really does sort of see both sides of the Dreamer issue. And keep in mind, this is a president especially who understands imagery, and he understands that taking these young people, many of whom, as he tweeted this morning, served in the military, are valedictorians, are sort of upstanding members of society, it does not play well in terms of a narrative, if nothing else. And so I think part of the reason he sent Sessions out there was, you know, as Glenn said, to sort of soft the limb of the tree, but also because it wasn't something he was comfortable with, and he and his aides understood that him standing up there, he would not be able to make the forceful case, and indeed, he undercut it this week.
Right. And I mean, it was notable that Sessions didn't make just the legal case, but the sort of substantive case. Basically, they had to have these people taking American jobs. There's a question, Glenn, and one of the interesting things here is there's sort of, I think, a unanimous view among folks that the Comey firing was catastrophic. And someone convinced him that when Sessions tenders his resignation, and I think if they gave him the correct advice, if you fire Sessions, that is absolutely nuclear. And he listened this time, apparently.
Well, look, Donald Trump has a very acute sense of self-preservation. It's one of the reasons we see his new chief of staff, John Kelly, gaining some traction. Trump will push things up to the edge, and if he makes the determination, very rationally, that the action will boomerang on him in an unacceptable way, he won't do it. As you said, Chris, one of the really interesting things about the Comey issue was that was a catastrophic decision. Steve Bannon himself said it was one of the dumbest moves in modern political history, most damaging moves. And the reverberations of that are extreme. What's very interesting is one of the few people who counseled him to do it, remember, was his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who thought Democrats of all people were going to come around and support Trump because in defense of Hillary Clinton. So I think what you're seeing over time, at least, is a progression where his sense of self-preservation at least has become better. So the decisions that he tends to be making seem to be more rational.
There's also, I mean, my theory often is that it's like forcing air to the balloon, and eventually the pressure overwhelms it. So we've seen times of actually relative kind of, I remember down the stretch of the campaign, it was Prompter Trump, and it was all about how Kellyanne Conway and Steve Bannon had him on message, and it did last for at least 3 or 4 weeks. But I guess my question to you, as someone who covers this intimately, like, is there a fundamental alteration in how the White House is functioning?
No, I don't think there's a fundamental alteration. And even General Kelly, new chief of staff, went in saying, I'm trying to control the things I can control. The information flow to the president, the people he sees, how he interacts with them, but not the president himself. So there isn't that fundamental shift, although we are seeing stuff in the margins. But to your other question about sort of the way we can see Trump scripted and then going off script, I always think that's exactly right, and I think of him as sort of needing a release valve. And so when you see him give a teleprompter speech and then he goes wildly off script at a rally or sends out a tweet, it's as if he sort of needs that release.
Yeah, to that point, I should say the president basically went back to his very controversial Charlottesville comments again today, where he essentially took time to blame the other side, meaning the not-Nazi side, which is sort of retrenchment yet again. Ashton Parker and Glenn Thrush, thanks for being here. Coming up next, Michael
Wow.
Moore is here. Don't go away.
Shouldn't have played this round.
I'm trying to prepare for this day. I'm still not ready. The reason I'm telling you this is that there will be moments in your life that you'll never be ready for. Your little girl getting married will be one of them.
Recording.
Patrick woke up with back pain, but he has work to do.
What's up?
So he took him home. If you take it out, he stopped for more pills from that. All you need is the strength to stop top pain for up to 12 hours with just one pill. Only all day strong.
When food is good and clean and real, it's okay to crave. And with Panera Catering, there's more to go around. Panera, food as it should be.
Morning Joe speaks truth to power. This is how a guilty person acts.
He's shattering the hopes of the people who voted for him.
With access to the people who matter. I have been told by people in the administration from the Senate floor to the Oval Office. The American people have a right to know. Morning Joe, weekdays 6 to 9 on MSNBC.
This is going to grow larger than anything that we've seen in recent memory. It's going to grow from last night to tonight, then to tomorrow night, and the next night. So phase one right now is just people get up out of the chair, go out into the street, be peaceful, but be heard. This is I predict this is going to be a very large thing.
That was Michael Moore 3 nights after Donald Trump was elected 10 months ago. And a whole lot has happened since then. There's a case to be made that the resistance, as it's called, has been more powerful and more successful than anyone could have imagined immediately after the election, when everything looked so bleak for so many. The documentary filmmaker and activist Michael Moore now has a Broadway show, The Terms of My Surrender, about resisting President Trump, and he joins me now. It's good to have you here in person. Thank you. You're working just a few blocks away.
Yes, I'm at Broadway Theater. Actually, I learned recently, and tell me if this is true, you directed Lin-Manuel Miranda's
First musical. First.
In high school.
Yes, as a senior in high school.
You were his director.
I was his director. I brought to life the
Man
vision.
who gave us Hamilton.
That's right.
You were his first director. That's impossible.
I know. It was amazing. Actually, it's funny. I can still hum the tunes of that show, which was a 20-minute musical that featured a maniacal fetal pig in a nightmare that he had cut up in biology class. But that's
Bob, let's go to a clip right now if we can.
Here, I want to start with this. You and I talked. We talked that first. I think it was a night or two after the election.
Yeah.
People in the streets. We've talked since then. There are two arguments to be made about what's happened. One is that the resistance really has achieved more than people thought it possibly could have when you go back 10 months.
Right.
And the other is that people are still punching themselves out in the same way they were during the election. Which of those do you think is more accurate?
Oh, the first is more accurate. You mean the punching out? You mean between the burning people and the hammering people?
No, I mean that there's people who still say the base is still with them, and you're making all these arguments you tried to make in the election, it didn't work, and they like the fact that he is who he is, blah blah blah.
Yeah, no, I think the base is probably still with him. I think that's true, and we have a lot of work ahead to remove him, because the Republicans in Congress have already polled their gerrymandered districts. They already know, they think they have a pretty good chance of coming back next year, regardless of what Trump does.
They really do.
Yeah, so impeachment is not around the corner here. People are hoping that Bob Mueller can somehow indict him, but there's a lot of constitutional questions about that. And he can indict him after he's a civilian, after Trump's a civilian, then we can indict him. And then I think our only question is going to be, do we try him as an adult? That will be the only thing yet to be determined.
But in terms of when you look at these big fights, when you look at the fight over the Muslim ban, held up in the court's going to be appearing for the Supreme Court, the ACA repeal fight.
Right.
My read on the situation is the activists and the organizers and the politicians and the legal, the ACLU and folks like that have provided a friction against him that has been stronger than I thought it would have been.
Yes, and that is in part because our opponent is not well. So we've taken advantage of that. We feel bad as liberals because you want to be nice to people who are not well, but well, you can't let someone behind the wheel of the car, you know, if they're intoxicated, and you have to pull them out. And so what we've done is we've obstructed him, and we continue to do that. All the legal groups are going to continue to take him and his people to court. The resistance will be in the streets, will be at town halls. We are recruiting people in congressional districts and state assembly and state senate districts for next year. People are going to win.
This year, I should note, this year the state, there's a challenger, I think, in every state delegate district in Virginia, which has
exactly
this year, which I think is
exactly. And we the people are not leaving it up to the Democratic Party, God bless them, to actually come up with a stellar list of candidates because a lot of the doers of the Democratic Party believe that they're running more moderate or more conservative candidates, and that is the wrong way to go, and that is exactly how we'll lose.
Well, I want to put pin in that. I want to turn it up. I want to ask you about Chuck and Nancy, as the president calls them.
Yeah, Chuck and Nancy.
They're having these dinners. They're coming.
I had them over for dinner last week. Right?
Did you?
Yeah. They actually have never paid for a meal. They just
did you sign a deal with them too?
I signed. They're going to ghostwrite for me on my new TV series.
Do you actually just have dinner with Chuck?
No, that would have been plausible. I have been in the room and I've watched them eat. Does that count?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, all right.
Well, there's, when you watch this, the last week or two, that there was the debt ceiling deal, and now there's this talk of this possible DACA deal. What's your reading?
First of all, I of course believe Pelosi and Schumer that Trump told them that he would, not hurt these DACA kids, and they're not going to build the wall. Of course he said that, and I'm sure he said something different 20 minutes later. Again,
what the fuck are you doing with that?
Not well. All right, so
is that your? I want to be serious for a second.
Yeah.
Is that your genuine read on him?
That's part.
Because people talk about this, and I personally shy away from sort of remote diagnosis.
Yeah, not me though.
No, I know that. I'm making sure to be clear about the observation here.
Yes, you are not qualified though, Chris, to do that.
Well,
and I am.
Well, that's what. Do you actually? That's your read on this? Is that? Do you mean that in a jokey way?
I don't mean that in a jokey way. I mean that's part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that in my show every night, one of the first things I ask the audience to do is repeat after me: Donald Trump outsmarted us all. And then there's a little throw up in everyone's mouth at that moment.
That's a good bit.
And
that's a good bit.
Well, because he did figure out how to convince 8 million Obama voters to vote for him, the majority of white women to vote for him. He figured out, get this, where the state of Wisconsin is, and go there. All right. So he wasn't a. So I do think that there's this kind of mad, cunning. There's clever.
Hold that thought, because you just mentioned the show. I was walking in the neighborhood the other day. I saw that you had the show, but I saw the marquee and I was overwhelmed with envy.
Envy?
Oh yes, you have a show on Broadway. Stick around. Can we talk about that?
BC, dude.
We're gonna talk about that after the break.
During the Made to Move 2017 clearance event, you can do endless online research about the CT6. Or you can come in and have it all for less than you might imagine. Don't wait. Our 2017 models will be moving fast. You can drive a car, or you can drive a cow. During the Cadillac Made to Move 2017 clearance event, current non-GM owners and lessees get this low-mileage lease on this Cadillac CT6 from around $529 per month.
The day after chemo, you might need a trip back to the doctor's office, just for a shot. But why go back there when you can stay home with Neulasta Onpro?
Strong chemo can put you at risk of serious infection, which could lead to hospitalizations. In a key study, Neulasta reduced the rate of infection from 17% to 1%, a 94% decrease. Applied the day of chemo, Neulasta Onpro is designed to deliver Neulasta the next day, so you can stay home. Neulasta is for certain cancer patients receiving strong chemotherapy. Do not take Neulasta if you're allergic to Neulasta or Neupogen. Ruptured spleen, sometimes fatal, as well as serious lung problems, allergic reactions, kidney injuries, and capillary leak syndrome have occurred. Report abdominal or shoulder tip pain, trouble breathing, or allergic reactions to your doctor right away. In patients with sickle cell disorders, serious, sometimes fatal crises can occur. The most common side effect is bone and muscle leak.
So why go back there? If you'd rather be home, ask your doctor about Neulasta Onpro.
Molly, can you please take out the trash?
I reprogrammed the robots to do the inspection. It's running much faster now. See?
It's amazing.
Thank you.
If you drive less than 200 miles a week, then pay per mile car insurance can cut your bill in half. Introducing MetroMile, the leader in pay per mile insurance. Get a low rate starting at $30 a month, then pay just pennies per mile. 65% of us drive less than 200 miles a week. That means the majority of America qualifies for pay per mile insurance. Stop paying for miles you don't drive. Stand up to traditional insurance. Get pay per mile today. Pay per mile car insurance could save you $500 and cut your bill in half. Go to metromile.com now.
Face it, folks. When you buy your next car, you want a deal. Paul Balco's Good Car Company has some of the lowest prices in America on over 1,000 like-good vehicles. Practically new Silverados, F-150s and Rams under 18 grand. Also new gas-efficient Hondas, Nissans, Toyotas under 12 grand. And with over 100 lenders and down payment assistance, rates start at 2%, regardless of credit. Get your online hassle-free credit approval today, regardless of credit, only at paulblanco.com.
We're back with Michael Moore, who's got a show on Broadway called The Truth Must Surrender. What's the show?
The show is 2 hours every night of me telling stories. We do some fun stuff on the stage. There's a game show every night where people can win prizes. But I talk about some of how some of the things I've been through in my life that stories nobody knows about, and then I talk about people who make a difference. Just how one person, nobody's from nowhere, as we're called, can come out of that, and because none of us are nobodies, and we don't live in nowhere. And so the show, it's funny, it's very pointed politically, and by the end of the show, I'm handing out armbands and machetes, and we head over to Trump Tower. No, not really. It's a joke. It's a joke. I believe that I belong to the majority in this country. And I think that people are still in despair since the election. So they come to this show, by the end of it, hopefully less despair and more ready to give them some of the things to do.
You know, one of the things I've always found interesting about you from the time I first saw Roger and me, and I read about your books and I've seen your movies, is, you have this very self-identification with where you're from. And I think that there's a certain critique of the kind of liberal elite from the right that can be very caricatured and wrong-headed and sort of unfair. But there is no such thing as this sort of bubble, right? I mean, Broadway audiences kind of epitomize that.
Well, that's why I'm here.
Right. I mean, I'm curious what are you trying to tell that audience that's paying to see you?
Well, I'm in the capital of liberal America here. Right. And liberal America and the Democratic Party didn't get us in the White House. Even though we're the majority, even though we had 3 million more votes, we hold no power tonight. So therefore, I've come to the place where our liberal establishment exists as a voice from the Midwest, and also I come to the city that gave us Donald J. Trump. And every night
I am blocks away.
Yes, I'm a few blocks from Trump Tower, where he grew up in Queens, and I asked this New York audience, what the did you do? Well, because if Trump had come from Flint, Michigan, I don't think I could even show my face on this show. I'd be so embarrassed that I didn't stop that years ago. Why didn't New Yorkers stop this?
You know, it's funny you say that, because one of my theories about Donald Trump is that you actually can't understand him unless you understand the racial politics of New York City specifically, and the racial politics of crime in the 80s and 90s, and the idea that the city was being destroyed and rioting in the Central Park Jogger. That is the crucible that he was formed in.
Right.
And it's interesting you talk about that, because people think, well, you know, he is very much a New York figure and a New York politician.
Yes, and grew up in the same borough as Archie Bunker.
That's right.
That's where all the family was set over there.
Exactly right.
And so you're right about the racial element of this, where it's to Trump, it's those people, you know, and it's.
And New Yorkers like to tell themselves we're the most tolerant city in the world. That's not New York politics, but it very much, there's a real tradition of that.
No, this is the city that gives us Fox News, the National Review. Rush Limbaugh started here in WABC. I can go down the whole list of how much redneck, conservative, right-wing politics has come out of New York City. So, but
You mean redneck there, ironic?
I mean, yes, of course, yeah.
Just want to be clear.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that, yes, but they, yes, that's what I'm saying.
Michael Moore, it's called The Terms of My Surrender. We're here in New York. How long is it running?
That's running until October 22nd.
Right.
And I made a deal with the Schubert organization. The balcony is $29 because you know how broad.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
So I wanted to.
That's great. Fire up some.
Come to the show. You actually, I have a surprise guest that appears every night. If you would come out one night and after the show.
It's no longer going to be a surprise, but yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
I'll run over after the show.
Yes, man. Yes. If you'll do that, I would love it. And it'll be your Broadway debut.
That's also true.
And you can show the Manuel. But I'm real actor does.
Michael Moore, thanks so much for being here. Thank you. Still to come, President Trump's millionaire Treasury Secretary is explaining why he wanted the federal government to subsidize his honeymoon. And tonight's Thing 1, Thing 2 starts next.
Not one thing ever does it. It's a series of consistent things. It's time for change.
No, like that.
News breaks.
We've seen the president lawyer up.
Our trusted NBC News journalists will guide you through it. So wherever the story goes,
There's news, we'll bring it right to you.
you'll be right there with it.
You know who likes to be in control? This guy. Check it out. Self-evident.
It's really attached.
That's why I run Professional. Where I get the control to choose any car in the aisle I want. Not some car they choose for me. Which makes me one smooth operator. Still a little temper. Go national. Go like a pro.
The shirt, an essential part of the classic outfit, but for too long, shirts have been too long. Too many are forced to choose between hiding their pants with their shirt or hiding their shirt with their pants. That's why we designed the Untucked shirt, cut to the perfect length for whatever look you're looking for. Casual, classy, casually classic. Because only the Untucked shirt was designed to be worn untucked.
At Wayfair.com, we think that when the big stuff ships free, it's just better.
Yeah, better! Oh, Wayfair has free shipping. A game changer. Fast better, free better, everything's better. Ready, free shipping.
Orders over $49. Shop better at Wayfair.com. Wayfair, you've got just what I need.
You have a vision. It's why you can see what others can't. You know what you want, and we can help you get it. You need options? We've got all kinds, including special finishes and papers. And they're all absolutely guaranteed, every time, for any reason. Because you have a vision, and we have your car. 500 start at just $9.99 when you enter BC500 at JustAFriend.com.
Introducing the new Range Rover Evo. Life above and beyond.
Thing 1, tonight, Grayton Carter announced last week he'll retire after 25 years editing the magazine Vanity Fair. Before that, in the 80s, Carter founded another publication called Spy Magazine, where he famously referred to Donald Trump as a, quote, short-fingered vulgarian. Now, this has bothered Trump so much that for years he would send Carter pictures of his hands to prove they weren't small. And decades later, when it came up during the campaign, he spoke at length about his hands, even spending 4 minutes telling the Washington Post how he has zero issues with his hand size.
I mean, people were writing, how are Mr. Trump's hands? My hands are fine. You know, my hands are normal. Slightly large, actually. In fact, I buy a slightly smaller than large glove. Okay?
You chose to raise it during a debate. Can you explain why you made this choice?
Yeah, because I don't want people to go around thinking that I have a problem. I'm telling you, Ruth, I had so many people. I would say 25, 30 people would tell me every time I shake people's hands, oh, you have nice hands. You have good hands.
He said when he was merely a 6-time bankrupted businessman running for office, now that he's president, he can't still be insecure about his hands, can he? That's thing 2 in slightly less than 61 seconds.
Colon cancer screening for people 50 and older at average risk.
I think it's time for a new screen. For a different kind of screen. For colon cancer. Thought about it? His wife asked about screening options, and her doctor ordered me. I'm Colonar, the non-invasive test you use at home. No special training. Just a trip to the bathroom.
Cologuard, colon cancer screening that's as easy as get, go, gone. Cologuard is not right for everyone, so ask your doctor if it's right for you.
I love a good challenge, including when my 5-year-old draws a track for me to drive. If I need a little help, my Q50 is there for the assist. The new Infinity Q50 with drive assist technologies. Infinity, empower the drive.
Look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee you.
For a guy who has no qualms whatsoever about the size of his hands, Donald Trump talks about his hands a lot. Today in Florida, the president struggled to slip on gloves while helping serve meals, eventually giving up on the glove. We assume he was referring to the gloves being too small. Because 2 weeks ago, while slipping on the gloves in a Houston shelter, loud and clear.
My hands are too big.
Shrimp is back at Red Lobster, and we went all out to bring you even more incredible shrimp and new flavors. Like new Nashville hot shrimp drizzled with sweet amber honey, and new grilled Mediterranean shrimp finished with a savory blend of green onions, tomatoes, and herbs. Feeling hungry yet? Good, because there's plenty more where these came from, like garlic shrimp scampi and other classics you love. As much as you want, however you want it. But hurry, and the shrimp won't be here long. Don't let dust and allergens get between you and life's beautiful moments. Flonase outperforms the #1 non-drowsy allergy pill. It helps block 6 key inflammatory substances that cause symptoms. Pills block 1, and 6 is greater than 1. Flonase changes everything.
Some things are simply impossible to ignore. The strikingly designed Lexus NX Turbo and Hybrid.
Lease the 2017 NX Turbo for $299 a month for 36 months.
Experience amazing.
Over 100 certified pre-owned RVs all on sale now at Seagram's RV. Over 300 motorhome components covered for your peace of mind. Engines, transmissions, brakes, and more. All pre-owned trailers have over 200 components covered. Refrigerators, slide-outs, air conditioners. Fly with confidence. Save big now at Seagram's RV. Certified pre-owned Mini Winnie was $81,000 now, just $52,998. For this attitude toy hauler, just $12,992. Nobody buys for less. Nobody sells for less.
Seagram's RV Supercenter at Gilroy Outlets.
Bigger. Better. More. Chuck Chansey Gold. Bigger bands with thrilling award-winning dining options. More luxury in our invigorating spa. Better rewards, bigger winners, only at Chuck Chansey Gold Resort and Casino. Just minutes from Yosemite.
President Trump and Vice President Pence today traveled to South Florida to meet with local officials to tour the damage wrought by Hurricane Irma. After speaking to first responders in Fort Myers, the president traveled to Naples, Florida, where he helped hand meals out to Irma victims at a mobile home park.
It was a water on the last hurricane. It was playing ball.
Huh. What the fuck happened there? Get in the bunker. Get in the bunker.
As hard hit as Florida was, the damage was even worse in the Caribbean islands that were in Irma's direct path, including the British Virgin Island of Tortola, where the devastation was staggering, and survivors have no access to electricity or running water.
It feels like we're in Armageddon.
Just waiting for the zombies.
You know, we've kept our sense of humor through this. We have nowhere to go but building up. When you get to the bottom, you have nowhere to go but up. But it's one board, one stick, one log, one break at a time.
Tomorrow's headlines before they go to print. I've just been handed some great reporting. Tomorrow's questions before they go to Could you make an obstruction case?
I think I could.
The $11 Bruno Williams. It's 11 on MSNBC. Next, Emily Colorado live in studio with Rachel Maddow for a candid conversation. The questions no one but Rachel would ask, and no one but Clinton could answer. The Rachel Maddow Show, next on MSNBC. Experience the XC for this stuff.
Don't let dust and allergens get between
That's
you and
just
life's
wonderful.
beautiful moments. Flonase outperforms the #1 non-drowsy
Get off.
allergy pill. It helps block 6
bastard.
key inflammatory substances that cause symptoms. Pills block 1, and 6 is greater than 1. Flonase changes everything.
Hi, I'm Lori Grenier. I love long hair, but I don't have the time it takes to style it. Introducing the Sleep Styler, a heat-free system that takes your hair from this to this. Now you can create gorgeous curls poolside with the girls, all while you sleep or while you play. Sleep Styler has taken over social media. Girls are going wild over the hottest hands-free trend. Only $29.95, available online and at these fine retailers.
Another double, huh? 2 doubles on this fucking easy ass course.
Material provides up to twice as much pressure relieving power, so you won't toss and turn. Through September 17th, save up to $500 on select adjustable sets. Tempur-Pedic's name is power. Have you ever stayed on a 7-mile beach where the sand is right at your doorstep? A place where you can go native in style, where discovery and adventure are included. Everything is unlimited. A place where excellence is the standard and luxury the norm. Where every meal's an experience. Every toast an event, where fire lights up the night, and the dance floor is made of sand. Sandals the Grill, Jamaica's most sought-after beach resort.
Recently, you may have been notified that your personal information was compromised as part of a data breach.
Research shows that you are 11 times more likely to be a victim of identity fraud. Now is the time to get protection.
Although your information may have been taken, it may not have been used fraudulently. Sign up today, and LifeLock will begin monitoring your personal information, including your social security number, alert you about suspicious activity, and, if needed, take steps to help restore your identity.
Membership starts at $9.99 per month. Sign up today. LifeLock. Building a website in under an hour is easy with GoCentral from GoDaddy. In fact, 68% of people who built their website using GoCentral did it in under an hour. And you can too. Build a better website in under an hour with GoCentral from GoDaddy.
Hi, I'm Robert Sierra, Heinz Good Master Partner. My Memphis-style sauce is sweet and spicy.
Give it a lot of me.
Kansas City, sweet and spicy.
Heinz partnered with Rio Pitmaster, spokes, to bring you the flavors of America's top barbecue regions.
Remember Louise Linton? She's the actress and new bride of Treasury Secretary and former Goldman Sachs banker Steve Mnuchin. There they are at their wedding in June, flanked by the president, the vice president, who officiated the ceremony. Well, last month, you'll remember, Linton came under fire after posting this Instagram picture of the couple getting off a government plane in Kentucky, where they watched the solar eclipse from Fort Knox atop billions of dollars in gold. In addition to tagging her luxury clothes and accessories, hashtag Tom Ford Sunnies, hashtag Hermes scarf, etc., Linton condescendingly ripped into a commenter who criticized her running apart. Adorable! Do you think the U.S. government paid for a honeymoon or personal travel? Lol, 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 lol. But apparently it wasn't for lack of trying. We have now learned that Mnuchin asked for a government plane for his lavish honeymoon with Linton to Scotland, France, and Italy. He later withdrew the request, but it led to an inquiry by the Treasury Department's Office of Inspector General. An Air Force spokesman told ABC News, which first broke the story, that Mnuchin's ask was unusual and could have cost taxpayers about $25,000 per hour.
God
Asked
damn
about
it.
the request today, Mnuchin insisted he'd done nothing wrong.
My staff wanted to make sure that I was constantly had access to secure communication and secure information. So they put in a request to consider the use of an aircraft, not so much just for flying, but effectively it was a portable office so that I could be available. And ultimately, we withdrew the request.
Joining me now, MSNBC legal analyst, former Watergate prosecutor Joe Banks, and Chris Liu, former White House cabinet secretary and assistant president of Barack Obama. Chris, you interface with cabinet officials as your job. Do you buy the idea that Steve Mnuchin's concern for national security was so great that his staff was concerned it would be a threat to national security if the government didn't pay for his honeymoon plane?
I absolutely don't buy Steve Mnuchin's explanation. There are plenty of times where cabinet members, even ones that need to stay in communication, are allowed to fly on personal airplanes. There are other accommodations that can be made along the way. So this is just a continuation and the mockery of the ethics standards that's begun from day one of this administration.
Jill, they did withdraw the request. One has to know. But the thought I had was, if it's going to cost $25,000 an hour for you to work to fly for your honeymoon, you can just not take the honeymoon. I mean, you were the general counsel of the Department of Defense. What advice would you have given in that situation?
I certainly wouldn't have been flying on a government plane for my vacation, no question about it. I think we need to look at the laws that govern our people in top jobs, and we need to have laws that contribute to the safety of America, but that protect the American taxpayer. And that should apply to President Trump as much as to his government.
There is another story today about the sort of swamp that really bowled me over. That the acting director of the Office of Government Ethics, the Trump Ethics Watchdog, moves to allow anonymous gifts to legal defense funds, okay? So, Chris, this is a move to allow anonymous, unlimited contributions to legal defense funds, which are into the pocket, the bank account of individuals who are paying for legal expenses. What do you think of that?
Well, I'll say that, Chris, this is all a little foreign to me, no pun intended. I worked in the Obama White House for 4 years. I never hired a lawyer. I never knew anyone that did hire a lawyer. I ran the 2008 transition. I never met with any Russian officials, so I don't know what it's like to have to hire a lawyer. That being said, I'm sympathetic to people in the White House, but there are ways to do this. You need to have sunshine, you need to have disclosure, you need to ensure that the people that are making these contributions don't have any business before the government, or this becomes sanctioned bribery.
Yeah, Jill, I mean, the idea that someone can write a $10 million check for legal defense fund, and we don't know who that person is, seems to be problematic.
It is, and the question still remains, if they've done nothing wrong, why do they need a $1,000 an hour lawyer? If all they are is a witness to an event, if all they are is testifying to a conversation they overheard, they should be able to go in and testify without any legal representation.
I think I disagree with that. I disagree with that. If my friend said to me, I'm working, well, you could go back to the Clinton administration, and I think Bill Clinton and his folks would say that there are a lot of people who didn't do anything wrong that needed a lawyer up, right? I mean, if your friend came to you and said, I'm called before Mueller, or I'm going to go talk to investigators, wouldn't you, as an attorney yourself, tell them to get a lawyer?
I'm not sure that I would. Depends on what they have done, and if they've just overheard something, or if they've actually participated in it. And I might seek counsel to find out whether what I did was illegal, but I don't need to have somebody with me when I'm testifying to protect me if I haven't done anything. I mean, I think it's great that Donald Trump has given so much work to defense lawyers, and now it looks like to ethics lawyers and to possibly conflict of interest lawyers. So lawyers are definitely benefiting from this administration.
Chris, are you confident that we know the full details of the possible vectors of undue influence that are functioning in this White House right now?
No, not at all. I mean, every day there is a new way that this administration is trying to erode the ethics standards, and it's not just the White House staff; it's the example that this president, the lack of example that he sets, and that's why all of these different issues and stories that you are flagging all come together. When you have a president that doesn't take ethics seriously, this is what happens.
Yeah, I think there's really a question. I mean, we talk about ethics, and it sounds like sort of not strong enough, right? I mean, ethics sounds like a thing like, oh, you should do that, you should be a Boy Scout, but ultimately ethics are going to bleed into laws, and I think the concern if you're in the White House is what the legal exposure that folks may have as this all develops forward. Jill Wine-Banks and Chris Liu, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
All right, that is all this evening. The Rachel Maddow Show starts now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. Thank you, my friend. And thanks to Stuart Home for joining us this hour. My guest this hour is the...
Landed in the Pacific Ocean. White House official says the president has been briefed. Our senior international correspondent Ivan Watson is in Seoul, South Korea with the latest on what we know at this point. So what have you learned about it?
Well, we know that U.S. Pacific Command says that this was fired from eastern parts of North Korea, the eastern coast, and that it is believed to be an intermediate range ballistic missile that flew for about 20 minutes over northern Japan before splashing into the ocean. No reports of any casualties or damage, but certainly alarms going out across Japan and further ratcheting up tensions here in the region since this is the second time in less than 3 weeks that North Korea has fired a missile over Japan. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson saying this is a direct threat against the key U.S. ally, Japan, and it also comes less than 2 weeks after North Korea conducted a nuclear test, which has been met with international condemnation and another round of economic sanctions. Secretary of State Tillerson has singled out in response to this Russia and China, which it claims Russia is the largest user of North Korean labor, and China is the biggest supplier of oil, to take new measures now against North Korea. This is probably going to be discussed at the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council in the coming hours. South Korea has been conducting live fire drills in response to the recent nuclear test, and for the first time it announced that in response to the North Korean missile launch, it fired its own ballistic missile, claiming to have fired it almost simultaneously. Despite that, the South Korean president, Anderson, he insists that South Korea should not adopt or develop nuclear weapons, saying that that would lead to a nuclear arms race. It would not be good for anybody. And just a final surreal thought, despite all of this tension, despite the fact that North Korea in just recent days has threatened to drown South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. in a sea of nuclear fire, commuters here within an hour of the missile launch here in Seoul were walking to work as if nothing had happened, living next to this nuclear-armed neighbor that almost daily threatens to attack them. Anderson.
I want to appreciate the update. Now to something the president said today, ripping open in some ways wounds that haven't even started to heal in Charlottesville, Virginia, and across the country, blaming what he calls both sides for violence surrounding a white supremacist rally. There, Ryan Nobles joins me now. So the president basically repeated some of the comments that he had made last month.
Yeah, that's right, Anderson. In some ways, doubling down from what he said after what happened in Charlottesville, Virginia from a few weeks ago. And this comes after a very high-profile meeting with Tim Scott, the South Carolina senator, perhaps the most prominent African-American Republican in Congress, who went to the White House with the express purpose of helping the president to understand how African-Americans may have received his reaction to what happened in Charlottesville. Judging by what the president said today on Air Force One, he didn't seem to get the message. Take a listen.
I think especially in light of the advent of Antifa, if you look at what's going on there, you know, you have some pretty bad dudes on the other side also, and Essentially, that's what I said. Now, because of what's happened since then with that deal, you look at, really what's happened since Charlottesville. A lot of people are saying, in fact, a lot of people have actually written, gee, Trump might have a point. I said you got some very bad people on the other side also, which is true.
One of the people that did not think that Donald Trump had a point when he made those comments was Tim Scott. In fact, he said specifically one of the points that he wanted to make to the president was that you cannot find equilibrium between these two groups, and that is something that many people in America were uncomfortable with.
Oh, Anderson. And I know you spoke to Senator Scott about the meeting yesterday. He seemed hopeful. I'm wondering what he said specifically about the president's comments today.
Yeah, Anderson, when we talked to Senator Scott yesterday, he was really encouraged. He thought moving forward that President Trump seemed to understand his perspective and that they were going to be able to work on some of these issues together. But this is what he had to say today to our Phil Mattingly after hearing about what the president had to say on Air Force One. He said, quote, "That's who he is. It's who he has been, and I didn't go there to change who he was. I wanted to inform and educate a different perspective. And I think we accomplished that. And to assume immediately thereafter he's going to have an epiphany, it is just unrealistic." And one of the things that Senator Scott said to us yesterday was that anyone over the age of 3 can't be changed after a 40-minute conversation. It seems that Senator Scott did have a realistic view of his conversation with the president.
All right, Brian Nobles, appreciate it. Lots to talk about tonight with the panel. Joining me are Bianca Rodriguez, Jason Miller, Tara Setmayer, Jennifer Granholm, and Alice Stewart. Why bring this up? He's asked about the meeting with Senator Scott, and he pivots very quickly to what were perhaps the most controversial comments he's made in his presidency.
I guess one of the only answers could be is that he believes it. He thinks that he's right. He doesn't like to be proven wrong. He could have avoided this conversation. I mean, the best thing he had going for him was that it was audio only, and you didn't see his cabinet and staff behind him bowing their heads like we saw with General Kelly before he said this. I also think that he keeps himself. And this comes at a time where he puts both Republicans and Democrats really in a tight spot. Democrats are trying to work with him. He's got momentum going on DACA. He's got momentum going perhaps on infrastructure and even the debt ceiling. And now they're going to have their own constituents, Nancy Pelosi's, Chuck Schumer's, saying, this is the president, remember, who said that they're bad guys on both sides. And you've got Republicans who he's put in a corner and isolated as well, who are not so fast to come and support him on these issues. So he could really put himself in no man's land by continuing to go down this road.
Jason.
To be clear, when I saw these images from Charlottesville a few weeks back, these were horrific images. And when we looked at the president's comments afterwards, especially on that Tuesday, the first time that I was on TV after that, I was critical of some of the president's comments and the way that it was presented is to both sides. But I think what the president was saying today was very specific to Antifa in criticizing the violence that was coming from those people. And we saw those images on TV of people fighting back and forth. And there were people that were obviously that were fighting. There's no place for violence at all. And so while, yes, there was a lot of the political back and forth a few weeks ago, and some of that criticism on the president was very much deserved. I have a tough time criticizing him for today.
So it was interesting because he wasn't asked about Antifa. He wasn't asked anything about that or even what happened. He revisited that, and rather than pointing out white supremacists or KKK or anything like that, he just brought up Antifa as proving that he had been right. I mean, this seems both him wanting to back up and repeat what he had said previously, and also prove that he had been right the first time.
I think he did the absolute right thing in having this meeting with Tim Scott. It's important for him to have this meeting, but knowing that going in, he knew this was going to open up another can of worms that has gotten him into trouble before, and should have had his answer down pat. For him to bring up Antifa today, I think that was a mistake. The one thing that he has said unequivocally that is important, that he should not have backed down on at all, is that he absolutely positively condemns neo-Nazism, racism, and white supremacy. And he has said that. Unfortunately, when he says there's bad dudes on both sides and there's plenty of blame to go around, all of that gets watered down. I think it was important for him today to come out and make that one point about denouncing this hateful behavior and leave it at that and not open up himself to more.
What is the matter with him? I'm sorry to interrupt. You know, you can have a strong last word, but I am so amazed that after all of the criticism that he got about this, and he's a guy who likes to be loved, that he didn't learn enough. He knew this was coming, that he didn't learn enough to just let it go. We had a great meeting. He has I mean, I'm not a psychologist, but if you look up the definition of narcissistic personality disorder, that is the definition, somebody who cannot ever be proven wrong. He has a problem, and that is exhibit A of that, and it's also extremely disturbing for the country.
Yeah, I mean, we try to psychoanalyze this all the time, but Donald Trump is who he is. And this is a perfect example of that. He just came out of a meeting, not even 24 hours, with Senator Tim Scott, who is an honorable man, who is an African American who understands these dynamics and tried to explain to the President of the United States, which I think that's problematic in and of itself that this conversation even had to be had. But he tried to do that, and Senator Scott said in his interview, his post-meeting interview, that he was trying to explain this to the president, and the president was still trying to justify his position about there were bad people on both sides. He doesn't get it, and this is part of who he is. It's part of I brought this up many times, his mentor was Roy Cohn, who taught him to double down and never admit you're wrong, never back down. And even on something like this, that has ripped this country apart in so many areas. The issue of race and not neo-Nazis, white supremacy, is an issue that this should not even be at the fore the way it is now. In 2017, he cannot let it go. And we are still continuing. And it's like, what is it going to take? It's not. This is Donald Trump. That's his character deficit. He's a megalomaniac. And here's example A.
And another self-inflicted wound. He took some reviews from how he reviews. I mean, we saw tragedy across the country, but how he handled Harvey, how he handled Florida. He went down there. How he went down to Florida. We saw him handing out food, really touching and talking to people in the locals there. To come back and to doing this and to go there on his own, unprompted. Again, here's a man who, if you look back, has never apologized or even said, you know what,